Hey everybody, welcome to the Fired Up with CJ show. We have Kristin Neff here today, and we're going to be talking about her book, Self-Compassion, the Proven Power of Being Kind to Yourself. So welcome, Kristin.
Hello. Thanks for having me on.
You know, it's amazing. There are certain shows that I do, and I think, I really need this. And this is one of them. I was thinking about, there's a Myers-Briggs test, and at the end it says whether you're a perceiver or a judger, and I'm a capital J. Like, so on the scale of judging and perceiving, I'm all the way on the judging side. And that extends to me as well, right? You know, I judge myself, I judge others, I'm just a big J. And, I was thinking about how much we beat ourselves up. And I do this daily. We're like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. Or why did I say that? Or, God, I feel like such a jerk. Or how am I going to show my face up in this place because I did X, Y, and Z? And because I'm so outlandish, I say this often. I'm always like...
Yeah.
With my personality, I end up saying this often, and it's really a hard thing. So, listeners out there, does this sound familiar to you? Do you actually beat yourselves up? And what would change if you actually gave yourself some more self-compassion? So that's going to be the focus of this conversation, because I was not even familiar with the term. I was familiar with compassion. But I never, I first heard you when you were talking at the Wisdom 2.0, and I thought, self-compassion? What's that? I mean, it's so unfamiliar. So what is self-compassion?
Well, so I really don't see self-compassion as different than compassion for others. You know, in both cases, compassion means concern for suffering, the desire to alleviate suffering, kindness, understanding, care. The problem is that most of us are much more compassionate to others than we are to ourselves. It's as if we cut ourselves out of the circle of compassion. And, the old adage is, well, in the Bible it says, do unto others as you would have others do unto you.
Right.
You do not want to do unto others as you do unto yourself, because we are often the most harsh, cruel even. We say things to ourselves that you wouldn't even say to someone you didn't like very much.
Yeah.
So really self-compassion, the reason I use that term was to just highlight that this is one object of compassion that we don't give much attention to. And also, I like to use that term because it's kind of analogous to self-esteem. And I've been very interested in talking about how it's a way to relate to yourself positively that's actually in the long run healthier than self-esteem. So, but really it's when you're suffering or when you failed, made a mistake, or something's really difficult in your life, it means treating yourself with kindness, care, and concern, that you kind of frame your experience in light of the shared human experience. You know, compassion is taps into some human connectedness. We're all in the same boat, really. And then just being mindfully aware of what's going on with ourselves.
And so how you said that relative to self-esteem, which you were really interested in, it's different. It's different in the long term. How is it different than self-esteem? I know you have a whole chapter dedicated this in your book.
My TED Talk goes into that, because it was actually, I was doing a postdoc, 2 years of postdoctoral study with a leading self-esteem researcher while I was practicing self-compassion in my personal life. And it comes from, Buddhism basically is my pathway to it. And there's all sorts of research now on the downsides of self-esteem. There's not a downside to having it. I mean, you definitely want it as opposed to not having it, hating yourself. But most people get their self-esteem in unhealthy ways. So, for instance, this is pretty ubiquitous. If you want to have just even a little bit of self-esteem, you have to feel special and above average.
Right.
If I said, CJ, your show, it's average, you'd be crushed, right? It's not okay to be average.
Yeah.
So if we all have to be special and above average just for kind of baseline feeling okay about ourselves, well, there's a problem, because basically it's logically impossible for us to all be average at the same time. So our self-esteem is predicated on a logical impossibility. And so what it means is it sets up this constant social comparison. Is she prettier than I am? Is he making more money than I am? Is he more successful? And we're always kind of jockeying for position. And there's always going to be someone doing it better. I mean, you might be a supermodel, and then there's that younger supermodel with bigger breast size. It comes on
Right.
all of a sudden you feel ugly and fat or whatever it is. And then, so that's one problem. Also, for instance, there's research showing bullying, which starts in early adolescence, just when kids are starting to form a sense of identity, sense of self. Why do they bully? For self-esteem reasons, so I can feel bigger, cooler, stronger than that weird kid I'm picking on.
Right.
So, why are people prejudiced? I mean, that's a complicated one, but at least some element is my group, my religion, my ethnic group is better than yours. Right. So this need to be better than in order to...
I get it. Okay, got it. So the self-esteem is like you're always comparing yourself to others versus self-compassion is like I am like all others. I'm suffering like everyone else. So that's exactly. A huge difference. I get it.
Huge. So it's connected. So self-compassion says, we're all flawed. We all make mistakes. We also have strengths and good things about us as well. But this is the shared human condition. Mm-hmm. Now, this, for instance, also the other side of that would be how self-compassion is different than self-pity. Mm-hmm. Self-pity is, woe is me, poor me, my life's terrible. It's very self-focused. And again, we fall into the trap of thinking somehow we're unique. We're kind of comparing ourselves to others.
Oh, yeah, so it's actually kind of a different flavor of self-esteem, and like, I'm such a victim. I'm more of a victim than anyone else.
Exactly. And it's so easy to do. We just because of the way our minds work, and we fall in the trap of, because we are the number one character in our own show, we forget about other people. So self-compassion, you're constantly reminding yourself, imperfection is the shared human experience.
Yes.
And if you do that, you can actually feel more connected to other people when you fail or you make a mistake than isolated, which is normal. And
or better than, which is again an isolating kind of thing.
And the other big difference with self-esteem is self-esteem tends to be contingent on success. Right? So you feel high self-esteem when you win that competition, or you look the way you want to, or you're really popular. And then when you fail, your self-esteem deserts you, goes out the window, right? Self-esteem goes up and down based on our latest success or failure. Self-compassion steps in precisely when self-esteem deserts you. And that's when you fail and you remember, well, it's human to fail. Failure is a great learning experience. I'll just pick myself up and try again. Yeah. So you might say it's a more stable friend to you than self-esteem is.
Yeah, I love it. And then, as a spiritual person, we're having all these self things that we're supposed to do. We're supposed to give ourselves forgiveness. We're supposed to love ourselves. And this felt sort of like that. It seems like, is self-compassion, how is it different than self-love?
Right. So, they're all interrelated, and these are kind of overlapping categories. So, self-love, the reason I don't like that term as much is that it's a little harder to differentiate that from perhaps narcissism, which could be a form of self-love, or again, kind of self-pity. The word self-love, it's not that there's anything wrong with self-love, but the word doesn't convey that sense of connectedness the way self-compassion does.
I see.
Right? Which, and also, so it's also broader. Compassion, just by definition, is always in the context of suffering. So in some ways, self-love is broader, where self-compassion is what do you do when you're suffering? Again, either whether that suffering is because of something you've done, a mistake, a failure, an imperfection, or, you get that diagnosis or something happens in your life. So it's really how you respond to suffering in particular, which is why it's so powerfully linked for mental health, because mental health is really basically how healthy you are. It depends on how you respond to suffering in your life.
Right.
So
interesting. So it's different than self-love, because self-love can be misconstrued as like self-absorption, narcissism, versus this is bringing yourself back out to the human experience.
The human experience, and especially it's accepting that the human experience is imperfect. Mm-hmm. It's very funny. No one tells us this. No one would admit this out loud. But it's almost as if we expect things to be perfect. And if I make a mistake, or, something goes wrong, like I do get that diagnosis, it's as if, this isn't the plan I signed up for. This is abnormal. This shouldn't be happening.
Right.
And so that feeling that this shouldn't be happening, first of all, it makes us feel isolated, as if everyone else is living these perfect lives, and it's just me who's failed. And And it also creates real resistance, like, God damn it, I can't believe this is happening, and frustration,
Right.
and it makes us react and lose control.
Right.
Whereas if you say, this is a human experience. It hurts, and I will comfort myself and care for myself in the midst of this hurt, but this is normal. Mm-hmm. And then you've got the calm and clarity and actually emotional support you need to try to make wise choices.
You have a chapter in your book, Self-Compassion, the Proven Power of Being Kind to Yourself, about working with kids. And I have a child who is putting together a painting business. He paints these little miniature models. And he's getting commission sales, and it's the first time that he actually sold one of these models to a store. So he's very nervous about, what are they going to think, and are they going to like it? And he sent an email, and he wanted to hear back their response about their judgment on his work, and he's an emotional kid by nature, and I think a lot of us are emotional. And in fact, if we really admit honestly or truly, most of us are emotional. We're emotional beings. And so he was just distraught, and I said, honey, what's going on? What are you feeling? And he's like, well, they're not responding to me in email, and I don't know if they like my stuff, and they won't respond to me. And this is like a 13-year-old, so he's they're really impatient. And I said, wow, that must be really frustrated. I used your model. I said, or it sounds like you're feeling frustrated. Wow. You know what? I get really frustrated when people don't respond back to me oftentimes. And it doesn't mean anything about you. They're just not responding for whatever reason. And then I said, and I used your model. I said, so, we can actually make all sorts of ideas about why they're not responding and say it's us. Or maybe he got the model, he didn't like it, or whatever it is. But, we don't really know. So at this point, you're creating all these stories about what may be happening. It may be better to maybe just wait, and I know it's hard to be patient, and I get really frustrated. And I said, so what do you want to do? Do you want to be happy, or you still want to be, to feel sad and frustrated? He's like, sad and frustrated. I'm like, okay. Which before I would have been like, I'm converting you to happy right away.
That's perfect. And that's so wonderful, because our instinct is to want to say, well, you shouldn't be frustrated because it's not about you, or especially as parents, we're always trying to fix things, try to make the pain go away. Compassion is very interesting, because it's the desire to alleviate suffering, but the wisdom of compassion is we know that if we try to push it away or deny it or control it, it just makes things worse. Okay. So, for instance, there's a saying, and I've developed something with a colleague called the Mindful Self-Compassion Program to teach compassion. And one of our mantras is, we give ourselves compassion not to feel better, but because we feel bad. So in other words, if you use self-compassion to make it all perfect and to make yourself happy and to make the pain go away, what you're actually doing is you're resisting what's happening. You're making it worse, because we know when we resist something and fight against it, it usually makes it worse. And we aren't really accepting the reality of, life hurts sometimes. So what we do is we accept, like your son, it's so beautiful. Yes, it is frustrating, and this is happening, and everyone gets upset when they're frustrated and they're impatient. And can we hold that? Can we be with that in a kinder, gentler way? So you're never really trying to get rid of your experience or change it. You're just trying to hold yourself kindly in the midst of your experience. And then what happens is, often it's funny when you give yourself this kind of loving, connected presence with whatever's happening, then things kind of heal more naturally. They change more quickly, but you aren't controlling it. You're just not getting in the way of the healing, which is naturally occurring.
You're accepting what is. So the negative emotion comes up, frustration, impatience, whatever, and you're just saying, I'm just accepting what is at this moment and being with it. And what's so funny is, I think I did something else, because I've been trying this formula out now.
Okay.
I literally have to say, I have to recall it in my head. I'm like, yes, how, because it's so antithetical, because I don't give myself self-compassion. So it's really, it's literally something I have to memorize, and what did you say is the next step? so I think maybe in your book, or maybe I read someplace else, I said, so what can I do to help at this point? And thank goodness he's in some ways way more emotionally intelligent than I am. He said, I would really like a hug. That's the
Yeah.
only thing he could do. Please don't give me advice. Please don't tell me why adults get impatient and they have work and they can't read my emails. Like, please don't tell me that. I just want to hug.
Yes, exactly.
Bless
And then
his soul.
he'll calm down more easily that way. Yeah, it's very true. So, kind of, and you can, I talk about that in the book, and it seems really awkward at first, but if you give yourself some sort of soothing touch, like you could do a hug, or we often say hands on heart. There's physiological reasons why that's so soothing. Okay, so as mammals, we all respond to warmth and gentle touch as a signal of compassion. This is programmed into us as babies. We get calmed down and soothed, and we feel safe when the mother has the warmth and holds us gently and makes soft sounds, like the tone is gentle.
Yeah.
And our bodies respond the same way with ourselves. If we use a soothing, gentle tone, a kind tone, and we give some physical gesture so that our bodies feel the warmth and care, our bodies can calm down way before our minds can. So it's one of those things that it's a very quick, powerful tool that should not be overlooked, even though it feels really weird at first. But you start noticing it feels really good just to go, wow, this hurts. I'm so sorry this hurts. You kind of speak to yourself like you would speak to your child or a beloved friend. And we have this power and this resource that we aren't even aware of, but it's right here all the time, in the middle of the night, 3 in the morning, when everyone else is, and that's when things are getting really bad. You have this refuge, this place you can go to.
Yeah, so in your book, I'm talking to Kristin Neff. You're listening to the Fired Up with CJ show, and we're talking to Kristin Neff about her book, Self-Compassion, the Proven Power of Being Kind to Yourself. And folks, if you actually want to find a replay of this show, you can find us on Google Plus, or also on the Fired Up with CJ Facebook page, and also you can find a video program of this on YouTube. All right, now there are 3 components of which you've already talked about. One of the components, there are 3 components to self-kindness. One, or to self-compassion. One is self-kindness, which is the, like you said, the kind of soothing touch. And why I was kind of laughing in the background is that my kids now have they have a couple of lines that I use all the time, and now they're kind of using them back on me, and I'm laughing a circle. And you mentioned that about your son too. So I usually say, "It's okay, honey, it's okay." Like, I don't even know what it is. I'm like, "It's okay, it's okay, like, it's going to be okay." And then the other thing I'm saying, "That's right, that's right. Just relax. Yep. That's right." So I just have these things. So my kids are repeating them. But those are the kind of things, whether it's like, in your book, it's like, "Oh, honey," or "Darling," it's all right. And, it's funny because I work as a coach, and my clients, I notice that when they're talking to themselves and they're talking about stressful things, they'll either be like touching their arms like this, or they'll be, I think it's like an innate, if we allow ourselves, it's an innate soothing mechanism that we are hard-coded with, the self-kindness piece.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the thing. It is our physiology, our parasympathetic nervous system, and we're mammals, and, humans are born incredibly immature, so we have a very strong system so that we can be soothed and comforted. So it's a very natural response. And, obviously some people are going to feel awkward saying "darling" to themselves.
Right.
Now, I'm a mother, and I'm very kind of a mushy mother, so for me, it's really effective. But whatever language, if anyone wants to consider, well, how can I speak kindly to myself? Just think about how you speak to someone you really love and care about. Yeah. What words do you use? Do you say their name? Because you can also maybe say your name to yourself if that works. And really so important is, what tone do you use? Mm-hmm. Sometimes 2 people might say the same exact words, but one is like harsh. Right. One is kind and soft and supportive, and the difference, and your whole entire physiology reacts. Every time we are really harsh with ourselves, our threat defense system gets triggered. The fight or flight response. Self-critics have extremely high levels of cortisol because they always feel threatened because they're attacking themselves.
Oh my God!
For the attacker and the attacked, right? Yes. When you criticize. And so it's very activating. Your sympathetic nervous system is really activated. And then eventually you will become depressed as everything kind of shuts down in response to all the activation.
Okay, but the first isn't one of the steps mindfulness. So the other component is mindfulness. Because Because that's a hard thing, is just catching yourself before you start going into, because it's actually an ingrained, for me, I'm very self-critical, it's an ingrained behavior. So I start off right away just launching into myself without being mindful that I'm even doing that.
Yes, for so many people, one of the most constant and ubiquitous sources of pain in their life is their own self-criticism. It's that little voice that never goes away. And sometimes it's whispering, but it's still there. Mm-hmm. And so you have to really bring mindfulness, awareness of what's happening in order for you to respond with kindness. You know, if you aren't aware it's going on, then you can't give yourself the help and the care you need. But, you know, mindfulness in a balanced way, like some people are really aware when they're suffering and they're like hyper-focused on it, and they fall into self-pity and, you know, oh my God, the world's coming to an end. So mindfulness is very balanced. It's saying, this is what's happening. It's really hard, but I'm not avoiding it or repressing it. I'm aware of it, but I'm not exaggerating it. And that's the first step, is you got to notice the suffering. And then once you notice it, you can respond with kindness. Kind of your heart opens in response to that suffering. And then the third step, which is so crucial, he talked about, is framing it in light of common humanity. It's not pity, poor me. It's saying, well, actually, this is the human experience. You know, whoever said I wasn't supposed to fail or get rejected, I mean, this is normal. And the reason that's so important is, A, you don't feel so isolated. Right. And isolation is, you know, again, physiologically, evolutionarily, if we're isolated, we're dead, basically.
Yeah, so we don't like that as humans.
Exactly.
We want to stay connected.
You feel connected? Yeah, that's right. And then it also kind of helps you have some wisdom and perspective on the situation. It's actually not that abnormal. And again, the more emotional support and warmth, care, balance, equanimity we have, the better we'll be able to take steps to change our situation, if it's possible. Sometimes it isn't even. Right. But if it's possible, we'll take steps with a lot more clarity and effectiveness. Right. So it's not saying we don't try to change things. It's just kind of saying, well, this is what's happening. Wow, this is hard. Can I support myself? And then making steps to do what you can. You know?
You know, it's funny. I was just talking to someone, and it's becoming clearer and clearer to me that we're either motivated by love or motivated by fear. So if we're motivated by fear, it's kind of like, come on, you can do better. Like, why'd you do that? You know, you need to actually get better. Or love, which is, honey, it's okay. Everyone has these kind of problems, and it's normal. And, you know, just feel them. It's normal. It's just part of the human experience. You know, it's so interesting. I mean, it all comes down to fear. In my mind, it's all simplistically coming to it's simplified down to fear or love. You're motivated and can navigate your life through fear or through love. And to me, self-compassion is the ultimate expression of love.
You know what's kind of interesting, though? It gets even more. It's not complicated, but interesting. I do a lot of work in helping people to motivate themselves with kindness and compassion rather than criticism. Right. I mean, the number one reason people criticize themselves is they think if they beat themselves up, they will make that change they need to. They won't be lazy. They'll get things done. They'll reach their goals. Yeah. And as you say, it's like motivation by fear. I better get it done. Otherwise, I know I'm going to call myself these horrible names. I'll hate myself. I don't want that to happen.
Right.
Just do that. Whereas motivating yourself with kindness is more like a really loving parent or coach who says, I believe in you, I'm here, how can I support you? You know, really giving you the emotional tools you need to do your best. Mm-hmm. But if you start looking at the critic when it's motivated by fear, well, what is it afraid of? You know, the inner critic actually, underneath the fear, is the desire to be safe. So let's say you criticize yourself because you think you're overweight, okay, and you may be really mean and you know, to yourself, but what's really going on there? The inner critic maybe is worried that you'll be rejected. You know, that underneath that is the need for love, belonging, acceptance. Yep. So if you start looking at what's driving the inner critic, often the ultimate goals are the same as the inner compassionate self.
Interesting.
Well-being and safety. But it's like the inner critic is a tantruming 2-year-old who has no good idea about how to get its needs met.
Okay. Wait, so let me see if I got this. All right, so let's say weight is one of those things that I'm like, oh, why can't I just take that extra 5 pounds? Why did you go and eat that delicious whatever it is, right? And you're like, oh, why did I do that? oh, you're so blah, 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 right? So, and then, so I go into my self-critical talk. But really, when you say, well, why do I care about that? Well, because I want to look good. Well, why do I want to look good? Because then I'll be accepted, and I'll be looking my best and be accepted by other people and considered attractive. Like, why do I want that? Because I want to stay connected. So I want to go down like the little dungeon of my mind, and then say, right. Honey, you're going to be accepted. It's totally normal to want to be accepted, and if people judge you by your looks, that's just the way that some people are, but you don't have to do that. So that would be, is that what you mean? By
you can say to yourself, well, I accept you.
Yeah. Oh, that's nice.
I care for you. I wouldn't even think of that. Yeah. Some of these needs we can meet for ourselves. And what's also interesting is, some people, it's just 5 pounds and it's maybe more superficial, but some people perhaps are really unhealthy and really do need to change the way they eat and the exercise. Right. And so the inner compassionate self would also like oneself, to exercise more, eat well, because it wants you to be healthy and happy. So again, it's not like the inner compassionate self always says, well, don't make a change. I love you just the way you are. I mean, I do love you just the way you are. And you're suffering because maybe you're really overweight and you're really out of shape and you feel bad in your body and it's not good for your health, and I care about you. And therefore, how can I help? How can I give the emotional support needed to make a change? Yeah. So again, the goals are the same, and sometimes even the actions that the inner critic would suggest and the inner compassionate self would suggest are the same. But the way the message is delivered is radically different.
Yeah,
you can hear it much more easily when it's done just like a parent. If a parent says, you stupid, lazy slob, I'm ashamed of you, how effective is that?
Yeah.
And if the parent says, listen, I really love you, but I want you to get your grades up, how can I help and support you reach your goals? You're going to listen to that much more easily. So.
Yeah. It's funny because I was reading your book after eating a hot fudge sundae, and I was like, I can't believe I've just done this to myself. And I said to myself, and then, I actually was reading I'm like, okay, you have the perfect tool, your book, right. Self-Compassion, the proven power of being kind to yourself. And I thought, okay, what am I going to do? And I thought, okay, why were you overeating? I'm like, this is how you have compulsive eating? I'm like, I'm eating because I'm actually not really dealing with an emotion that I'm feeling. I'm trying to, when you have little spaces in your life where there's spaciousness because you've done, emotional work or whatever to clear it, then you have space. And then I think it's the human experience not to like that gap, that void, that spaciousness. And so I was eating to fill in that gap. And I thought, wow. I'm eating to fill in this gap that I created for my own, because I wanted to create more spaciousness. But maybe you ought to think about what the feelings you're feeling are and then go into them. So it really wasn't about like, oh, honey, it's okay. Go eat another hot fudge sundae. It's okay.
Grow up. That's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. It's more like, okay. Like, I went into kind of a solution-oriented thing, which is equivalent to your, go exercise or eat better, and I thought, you may feel the spaciousness, but eating is not really going to be the best thing for your health. Like, this is not the proper way of dealing with the spaciousness. Use, one of the other 100 tools in your tool bag to deal with the spaciousness. So I think that's interesting because that was that was one of the thoughts. I thought, well, will I still be motivated if I do this? But I think it's a different kind of motivation.
It is, and there's a lot of research now to support this. I mean, the beautiful thing, and even just since I wrote that book, like 150, maybe even 200 new studies have come out. The research is exploding because basically it works. So there's a lot of research. For instance, you go into the laboratory and there's a student and, they fail a test because you've rigged it so they're going to fail. And you help that student either to maybe be compassionate about it, to be kind and understanding and kind of balanced, or you can try to boost their self-esteem, or you can just do nothing, which they usually criticize themselves. And then you observe afterward what condition leads to the most motivation to learn, practice for the next test, do better. Self-compassion is the most effective. There's a lot of studies now. Again, it makes sense. The coach who says, I'm ashamed of you, you're hopeless, versus the coach that says, I believe in you. You know, everyone fails sometimes. It doesn't mean you're, incompetent, but how can I help and support you? That's going to be more motivating.
Yeah.
We know that when we think about coaching, when we think about parents, but for some reason we just think the stick approach.
Yeah.
The
for
best
ourselves, yeah. For everyone else, I'll love my kids, but for me, I need to beat myself up. That works the best for me.
And the research shows it's completely counterproductive, especially if it's habitual. If you are a habitual self-critic, you will be depressed.
Yeah.
And we know that depression is not exactly the mindset you want to be in to go out there and conquer the world and do your best.
Yeah.
So.
All right, so I wanted to take a common problem that I think everyone is, one of the, I was looking at the most common fears and fears of failure, and that is public speaking.
Yes.
People really don't fear. And so what I wanted to do is take your three components and knit it together and kind of demonstrate how we actually may show self-compassion. So let's say, actually, I'll give you a real example based on me. I did a TED Talk, and we had a couple of practices, dry runs, where people would come up and do a dry run, and then they would, where I am, they'd kind of spew all over you and tell you how it's broken and stupid and need to be fixed. So I had one of those. I don't know about your TED Talk, but mine was...
No, mine was very supportive, thank God.
No, mine was the opposite. Mine was the self-critic made in another person. It was the critical from the other person. So I went home going... oh my God, I don't know. And, it's like, oh, I should have prepared more, or what was I, doing all those different things. And we all have examples of, we have an important presentation, we don't do as we thought we were going to do. Tell us how we take your three components and knit it together.
Okay. Well, so the first thing, I mean, you could do it a few different ways, but again, mindfulness usually is the first step. So instead of being lost in the, oh, I'm terrible, I can't do this, and being lost in the emotional reaction of it, to stop and say, I'm suffering. This is really hard. I'm really upset. It was very hard to hear that, and to kind of acknowledge and validate the emotional pain you're going through. And a lot of the agitation can calm just by validating, oh, this is what's happening. Okay, I'm really upset. Really feel frustrated. I maybe feel hurt. I maybe feel humiliated. I might feel ashamed. There might be a lot of feelings going on. So being mindful, what's happening. Okay. And then the kindness, right? Just like, what would you say to a really good friend if that situation happened to them? You'd probably say, hey, it's okay. And it's not, you're kind of reassuring your friend that they are competent, and that, but also, like, you might even say to your friend, oh my God, then give me a hug. That must have been so painful. So really responding with kindness, care, and concern for the pain of basically being publicly slammed. Sorry, CJ, I really do feel some compassion here. And then the common humanity, right? So then there's a couple different things going on here. One is the common humanity of the fact that this happens to people. A lot of people are in these situations, and they're publicly criticized, and it's very, very difficult. But then, of course, there's the common humanity of just, maybe, I have no idea, maybe you didn't do your best. I mean, maybe you did great and this person was jealous, or maybe you didn't. And that's okay too. It's learning from our failure experiences and accepting that failure experiences are normal. We can't get it right all the time, that we're all works in progress. So really using kindness and support and the sense of common humanity to not only deal with your emotions at the time, which is going to help you do better, because the next day when you give your talk, if you're thinking, oh my God, I'm a failure, I'm worthless, you're going to be nervous and anxious.
Right.
So calming yourself, supporting yourself, validating yourself. And also remembering that, you are a work in progress, and, you do the best you can, and it's kind of a truism, but it's a truism because it's true.
Right. I'm doing the best I can at this point. Yeah, if I could do better, I would. Okay, so there are some, so we're talking to Kristin Neff, who's the author of The Proven Power of Being Kind to Yourself, Self-Compassion, and we're talking about self-compassion. For folks out there, you can actually find out more about this book and order it on Kristin's website, which is selfcompassion.org. You can also get some of her meditations on selfcompassion.org. There are a bunch of mindfulness meditations and other meditations to help you get more congruent with this. And if you go to my firedupwithcj.com on my website, on this blog post are links, 3 links to some of the meditations and also to your class. So we have a bunch of questions on the line. So one of the questions is there a process to follow? So if we actually use the example that we just gave about, doing a presentation and not doing as well as you would have hoped. And so the first thing is being mindful. So what I heard you in the example that you gave me, I heard you being mindful of labeling what the emotion is: frustration, failure, guilt, shame. And then once you labeled it, to be in it, like, wow, I'm feeling really guilty, shameful, bad, stupid, idiotic. Let's say, for example, that's what I was feeling, which were all those things,
Yeah.
so I was feeling like I'm feeling like a failure, why can blah, 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 but just like, wow, I'm really suffering right now. So the first component is mindfulness.
Yes,
And
mindfulness.
and then the second would be figuring out, what you would say to a good friend. And if it were me, and in fact, I just said this to a good friend, saying, you know what, you're learning, you're growing. It's not, I think one of the key things is to think about this as feedback versus failure. This is the feedback that you need to get this tight and good and a really good presentation. So just remember that this is feedback. Don't take it personally. They may not have delivered it in the best possible way, but it's feedback and they're trying to help. So, go ahead and try to listen to it and try to take out all the negativity that they may have been portraying and just take it as feedback on face value. And then I think I did I'm going to take a warm bath now because I feel like it's just beat the crap out of.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's the second part, which is self-kindness, right? Whether it's in words, feelings, actions like taking a hot bath or whatever. And then the third part I heard is saying, you know what, the common humanity, which is the third part. You did the best you can. All you can do is be where you are right now. Everyone has this. Yeah, so that's what I'm hearing is a process, right?
Well, no, so I would say the first, you pretty much always have to start with mindfulness, but sometimes you can go to common humanity and then kindness. So those two depend. I actually have something, and I think I have an MP3 of this on my website called the Self-Compassion Break. And it's a handy dandy self-compassion tool that you can memorize to help yourself in situations like yours. And so there's...
Is it the mantra? Or is it
it's the mantra. I call it the break, but it's a mantra. So the first phrase is, this is a moment of suffering, but using language that works for you. A lot of people, that doesn't work, but you might say, this really hurts, this is really hard. Suffering is part of life. In other words, this is normal. Everyone goes through this. It's not just me. This is, part of the shared human experience. And then may I be kind to myself. And then when you give yourself kindness with the mantra or the break, basically you also do some gesture. So, might be hands over heart or just holding your hands, whatever feels most comfortable and soothing. May I be kind to myself in this moment and give myself what I need. And so if you have the mantra memorized, and, you can even change it up to make it speak to you personally, then when the what hits the fan, it just comes up automatically.
Right.
It's very, very useful.
Yeah, I love that. I actually had it earmarked. I haven't used it yet, but it seemed like one of those things, like, if you're going to, one of the things that I've studied neuro-linguistic programming, and our language basically is hypnotizing of ourselves. If we repeat it long enough, we start hypnotizing ourselves, or you could even describe it from you're manifesting those things, whatever language that you want. But I think if you're going to repeat a mantra and remember and repeat something repeatedly to yourself, why not have something positive like the mantra you mentioned versus, oh, why did I do that? I'm such an idiot. Whatever it is that is a mantra, it's kind of a nice one to kind of search and replace that and have something else to say to yourself, because you want something. I think our natural reaction is to react when something like that happens.
Yeah, and the nice is that. And it's also different than positive thinking. A lot of people think about positive affirmations, and I'm great, and every day and every way I'm getting stronger and stronger. That can be problematic because it may...
Whoops, we lost you. Rebel, can folks hear out there? Rebel, are you still there?
I can hear you, but we did lose Kristin.
Okay. All
There
right.
she
So,
is.
well, she comes back. I think she's coming back. There she is. Okay, we lost you for a second.
Sorry. Did you hear the bit about the difference between self-compassion and positive thinking?
Yes, you said that some people have the mantras, but I didn't hear the last part. So you may go like, "I'm great, I'm wonderful," even though you've had this horrible experience.
Yeah, so the thing about self-compassion is you're admitting that maybe you failed. You're admitting, sometimes you've hurt someone, sometimes you failed, sometimes you've gotten that cancer diagnosis, and it's a lot's going on. Oh, sorry, I lost you again. So you're basically with self-compassion, you're opening to reality, but you're shaping reality not through saying reality is other than it is. You're shaping reality by giving basically love and kindness to reality. And anytime you hold anything with love and kindness, things tend to take a little direction on their own.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm sorry, I'm going to go back to my simplified model of you can either modify and live a code of love or fear. And I know it's so simplified, but that's how I think about it.
Well, no, it is true. The reason it's important is that some people start beating themselves up for beating themselves up.
Yes.
You don't want to criticize your inner critic because that fearful, scared 2-year-old is actually just trying to keep safe. So you also want to love your fear.
Yes. I know, but it's the fear of fear is actually awful. I think I've never even heard of such a thing. I went to a meditation retreat, and someone said I keep on having a fear of fear, and I'm like, what is that? But it seemed whatever it was, I haven't had that fear of fear, but that person seemed to be miserable. So better to even love your fear. Okay, so the one of the questions was, will this help you listen to yourself? Which it seems like mindfulness would it?
Yes, absolutely. Listen to yourself and validate yourself.
Yeah.
Right? So like a common self-compassion phrase I use is, it's so natural for you to be feeling this way. You aren't even saying it's right or I'm justified. It's just very natural. Right. So really listening to your emotional reactions, your fears, whatever's going on, listening deeply and compassionately absolutely helps you. As opposed to just saying you should do this or you should do that or you aren't doing this. It's like, really opening to your own experience and being clear. And then listening for those small voices that may have something really important to tell you.
Yeah. You know what I just realized as you were saying that is that, okay, if we all have this driven need to be connected in community, to be accepted, part of it is just like, am I normal? That's kind of the whole thing that's running in the back. Am I normal? Why is this happening? Do I not fit in somehow? And somehow these comments, the humanity part is saying, you're normalizing, you're saying, it's normal. Everyone gets frustrated, everyone gets scared. It's interesting because if I was mapping it back to the thing that you said before, which is really what we're trying to do is like, why is it that we want to lose the 5 pounds? Because we want to be normal, we want to fit in, we want people to love us, right? But if you can kind of normalize it, which is what I think the common humanity part does. Whenever I'm with clients and I say, yeah, that's normal. This happens. I'm like, you're probably feeling this and this and this. Or I'm like, basically when people do this exercise, they come out with, I'm a loser. So I don't know. Is that how you're feeling? They're like, yes! It's like 9 out of 10 people, they come up with the same thing because it's part of the human experience. And then they just relax into it because they feel like, I'm normal.
That's right.
And so I assume that this is another question that's related to this. How do you think it helps with the healing process? So, you're traumatized, you've broken up, you've gained the weight. How do you think this, do you have any studies or research or what have you done in terms of healing?
Yeah, it's an incredibly powerful coping mechanism. So, for instance, people with trauma histories, maybe in childhood, one of the a lot of tragedies with that, but it does tend to make it harder for you to be self-compassionate at first because you didn't get that loving, connected presence from the people who should have been there for you. But there's research showing that through therapy or other forms of help, if you can learn to have self-compassion for your traumatic past, it's an incredibly powerful way to help cope with that. Using that compassion, giving yourself basically what you didn't have. It does usually take the help of a professional because there's a lot there, but very powerful. Like a study, a great study came out of divorce. a researcher had divorcing individuals come in who were in the midst of a divorce, and he just had them talk for 5 minutes. What are you going through? What's going on in your life? And then he coded, actually using my scale, how self-compassionate people were being, right? To what degree with their statement self-compassionate. And 9 months later, self-compassion by far, more than how depressed they were, more than their self-esteem, more than all these other factors, it was how self-compassionate they were that predicted how well they were coping.
So it helps with the healing process, because once you actually have self-compassion, you can heal more quickly, because I think love heals, right? I mean, basically you're giving yourself love, and love heals.
And so another term for the 3 components of mindfulness, self-kindness, and connectedness, common humanity, is loving connected presence. There's another way of thinking about it. It's very powerful. So what you're doing is you're trying to generate constantly a state of loving, connected presence.
Oh, I love that.
There's, just isn't that what we all really want? Isn't that what we're craving?
Yes.
Imagine going through life with a sense of loving, connected presence, the power that has. Even, it's not going to make your life perfect, but when again, things get really hard and you can have that with yourself. I know I talk a lot about my son's autism in that book. And, I can't imagine how I would have coped and gotten through if I didn't have my self-compassion practice. It was like this friend that was always with me constantly. When I thought, there's no way I just can't handle this, it's too much, I actually could handle it because I had my own loving, connected presence to get through it. So it's incredibly powerful.
That is a powerful idea. Okay, so there's another, does this help? And we help ourselves through things. I'm not sure how do we learn to listen to ourselves? So I think this goes back to mindfulness, because it's hard if you don't have a mindfulness practice. But actually, one of the things I'll note is that in your book, Self-Compassion, the Proven Power of Being Kind to Yourself, there's a meditation that does a body scan, so that if a mindfulness practice is not part of your normal being, there's actually a body scan. But I want to hear your answer. I know that you have an answer here or two in your book.
So mindfulness really is kind of the foundation of self-compassion. And luckily, we're in an age now where you can go in almost any community, learn mindfulness skills. But I will say, you don't have to necessarily sit down and meditate to learn how to be self-compassionate. It's great. I'm a meditator. But just learning other tools, like asking yourself, what would I say to a friend right now, can also be very effective. So really learning to listen to yourself, that question is often a very good one. What would I say to a friend in the exact same circumstance? And then you would think, oh, my friend, gosh, if this happened to a friend, she would be upset or she would be afraid, and this is what I would say to comfort her. So we know how to be compassionate. Most of us know, especially women. Women are less self-compassionate and more compassionate to others. But the good news is we know what to say, we know what to do, we know what to listen for. We just have to really turn that around and do that for ourselves. And to do that, what do we really need? We have to give ourselves permission. That's the biggest block. We think it's selfish, I can't do it, I shouldn't do it. But if you do, and if you give yourself compassion, you will actually have more emotional resources to then give to others. So it's not selfish at all.
It's counterintuitive, because you think, oh, I'm too self-indulgent, but it really isn't. You really need to recharge your batteries.
Self-criticism is very self-indulgent. When I'm thinking about how horrible I am, I'm not thinking about you, CJ. I'm thinking about you.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And folks out there, The Proven Power of Being Kind to Yourself, Self-Compassion, get the book, and then also tell us about your program too, real quickly, Eva, before we wrap up.
Yes. So we've developed this training program. It's an 8-week program where you meet for 2.5 hours once a week for 8 weeks. And we also teach it in 5-day intensive format. It's called Mindful Self-Compassion. If you go to Center for Mindful Self-Compassion, or there's a link on my website, you can find it. We're teaching this all over the world now. It's taking off. It's amazing. People are so hungry.
Exciting.
Yeah.
Exciting. Okay, selfcompassion.org is where you can also go to your website. Thank you so much for being here. What great information. I'm just so happy that all these resources and people out there that are researching how to be more loving to ourselves. It's so important. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. It was great.
I think it's going to change my life, and at least minimally will change my kids' lives. But I do think it's going to change my life. You know what I mean? It's just constantly making little pivots to a different way of thinking and being. And after you add all of them up, you will be different. You will be transformed. Okay, folks, we have Kristin Neff, author of Self-Compassion, the proven power of being kind to yourself. Thank you so much again.
Thank you, CJ. All right.
So next week we're going to be having Michael Sandler on, and he's going to be talking about mindful running and how you can be mindful while you're exercising. You can be basically the whole goal is to be mindful throughout the whole day, but bit by bit. So we'll coach you about how to be mindful when you're exercising. Folks, see you next week on Wednesday at 1 p.m. Pacific time and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Have a great week. Thank you, Rebel.
It means so much to me that you're listening to the show. I would love your support in any way by giving me comments below, or to subscribe to the show, or share the show with friends. Thank you again for your support. Love and blessings.